here's what I know. Based on you finding this video, I know you have some questions about your lineup this week. Well, I have those answers. Consider this your ultimate guide to week 7. Beginning with one of the starts of the week at the running back position, Raheem Mostert, who in this last game saw great usage. You see, Mostert only scored 5.8 points, but he saw 15 touches, 70% of the running back opportunities, and for the 5th straight week, he was the RB1 here. Well, what does this mean? Well, it means we can rely on him no matter what the game script is to be the starter moving forward. Tua is expected back this week, which helps the overall offense and Mostert find the red zone, which is something you can expect this week on Sunday Night Football against the Steelers because the Dolphins are 7-point favorites. And now this is massive for Mostert because in his career, as a 6-point favorite or more, he's played 5 games, he's averaged 17 opportunities per game and over 14 fantasy points per game. This basically means he's a top 10 running back in these game environments. So start him, but sit this wide receiver. And that would be Allen Lazard. Don't play him. And this might sound crazy because if you look at his fantasy points the last 4 weeks, he scored 13.5 points every single week for the last month. And he's now a top 20 wide receiver in points per game on the year. So why are we sitting him, Sal? Well, let's discuss. You see, Lazard has 4 touchdowns. He's basically thriving off touchdowns right now. 20% of his targets are becoming touchdowns this year. That is more than 3 times the NFL average. And here's what this means. It means his production is not sustainable. And when the efficiency wears off, he's going to need to rely on volume, but he's not getting it. He ranks 54th at earning targets this year, only averaging 4 receptions per game. This is basically bench player type material when the touchdowns go away. So sit him, but then grab this tight end streamer. I know you need a tight end. Tight end position stinks. There's players on buys. This is the guy to stream. And it is the rookie from Denver, Greg Dulcich, who made his debut in the last game, and boy, did it go well. Dulcich in this game led all the tight ends in snaps. With 41 snaps, 65% of the snaps led to over 12 fantasy points. He found the end zone. But that's not all. When he was activated, they actually scratched Albert O, and now Albert O is on the trade block. So this is just clear as day that Dulcich, the rookie, the guy that this organization invested draft capital into, is the guy here moving forward. Dulcich ran 22 more routes than any other tight end in the Denver team. That was in his first game ever. And in college, yeah, he was productive. He saw a 27% dominator rating, which is top 15% of all time. What this means is he saw 27% of his team's overall production in college. Receptions, yards. This is fantastic. It's very similar to what George Kittle did in college, and now he faces the Jets, who give up the 5th most catches to running backs. So start Dulcich, stream the dude, and then sit this rookie running back. And it's a player a lot of fantasy players love, and he just came back from injury a couple weeks back, and he was the starter this past week in Washington, Brian Robinson. Now, there's no doubt about it. He operated as the RB1 this past week. He saw 27 snaps, 10 more snaps than any other running back on the Commanders team, but the big thing was he ended up seeing 71% of the running back carries, the clear RB1. But there's a massive issue here. Not only are 3 running backs still involved seeing multiple touches per game, but he's not being used in the passing game at all. Here's what I mean. Right now on the season, in 2 games now, he has just 7 routes run. And in that last game where he actually saw more work, 48% of the snaps, he only ran 3 routes. I mean, you want your running back to be running at least 15 to 20 routes. This is not useful. J.D. McKissick and even Antonio Gibson are being used more in the passing game, which limits the upside of Robinson. It means he's going to rely on touchdowns, but that's going to be difficult this week because the Commanders are starting backup quarterback Taylor Heineke, who was not good last year, and it's leading them to have the 3rd lowest team total on the week. They're projected to score just 18 points this week, so don't be relying on a rushing touchdown for Robinson here. You want to sit him. Even in a good matchup against the Packers, who rank 30th in run defense, this 3-headed backfield and poor offense is not one to target. Sit him and go get this wide receiver in your lineups as soon as possible. And that's the Patriots wide receiver Jacoby Myers, who is a must start. He's a top 12 projected receiver this week in my fantasy cheat sheet. That is my 5-step framework to win your fantasy week every single week. You can check it out, linked down below in the description. But this guy is consistent. He has a ceiling and he also has a safe floor, and now he has a great matchup. According to Pro Football Focus, Jacoby Myers' matchup this week is the 6th best on the week against all the cornerbacks in Chicago. This takes into account his skill set and obviously the poor Chicago defenders. And this is a Chicago defense that ranks 30th overall, but the individual matchup is very enticing for Myers in the slot. You see, he'll face Kyler Gordon, the slot cornerback for the Bears this year, who is allowing 80% of the passes his way to be caught, and he ranks 3rd worst in the NFL, which is good for Jacoby Myers, giving up 2.27 yards per route run. That is unbelievably bad. But if you're somebody who owns Jacoby Myers, the guy who's averaging 8 targets per game, that is really good news. So start Myers and this RB. And that's the veteran Ezekiel Elliott. He was a start in this video last week, and he's a start again because now he's coming off of his best game of the year. It worked out for us last week. He sees 14 touches, over 80 yards, and a touchdown. And the good news, Dak Prescott's back. And this is great because Zeke scores 74% more points when Dak Prescott is out there. Instead of scoring 11.5 points, he scores nearly 20 points per game. Obviously, this takes into account his prime when he was younger, but this is even into last year. And now Elliott's going to have the best matchup of the season against the Detroit Lions. Check this out. The Lions rank 28th at stopping the run this year, and they've given up the most touchdowns. 8 touchdowns on the ground this year through just 5 games. The good news for Zeke, well, he's seen 70% 50% of the Cowboys' red zone opportunities this season. Go and start him. And then you want to stream this next quarterback because I know a lot of you are dealing with bye week concerns, but also maybe just a bad QB on your team. And that is Marcus Mariota, who has quietly been a top 15 quarterback on the year. And more specifically, if you go through his fantasy points on the right column here, he's only scored below 15 fantasy points one time this year. I mean, this is a pretty safe floor for a guy who's a fill-in for you, or maybe even a starter moving forward. And he is somehow doing this while throwing for just 176 yards per game right now, but it's because he has the fantasy cheat codes for the quarterback position. And those fantasy cheat codes are seeing red zone carries and overall rushing yards. He's doing both. Mariota's running 7.2 times per game, and in back-to-back games now, he's seen 50 or more rushing yards, but not only that, he's averaging multiple red zone carries per game on the ground. This has led to 3 touchdowns on the year, and it's the reason why not only he has a safe floor, you can rely on 5+ points on the ground, but also he has a pretty high ceiling like we saw last week when he scores 3 total touchdowns. So use him as your bye week filler and then sit this next wide receiver. And hey, if you're enjoying this content, be sure you're subscribed. You don't want to play Terry McLaurin, and there's a couple reasons why, starting with the fact that Taylor Heineke is his starting quarterback this week. And last year when Heineke was the starting quarterback, McLaurin ranked 70th in catchable targets. Another way to look at this, 30% of the targets coming his way were not catchable. And that's because Heineke ranked 26th in quarterback efficiency and 25th in accuracy last year. He's just not a good quarterback. Yes, indeed, especially on his deep targets, he's much worse than Carson Wentz. So there's one reason. The second reason is that McLaurin's role, like we've discussed in the past, isn't good. He's just running deep routes, and that leads to boom bust upside, and there's less boom when Heineke's your QB. And then there's the fact that McLaurin's matchup isn't good. He's going to face Jair Alexander, the Packers' stud cornerback, who so far this year is allowing just 25 yards per game and has not allowed a touchdown in coverage. Sit McLaurin. But a wide receiver you do want to start is this next guy. And it's going to be the veteran, the 30-plus-year-old wide receiver coming out of his bye week with the Tennessee Titans, in Robert Woods. He needs to be in your lineup. Because Woods just saw the best usage of the season before the bye week, and people forgot about it because then the bye came. He played a season-high 81% of the snaps, ran a season-high 28 routes, led to 8 targets. All of that was fantastic, but look at this number more specifically. He ran a route on 93% of Tannehill's dropbacks, the most of the season. Now, another way to look at this is that Woods is basically never leaving the field. And now he has a matchup against the Colts' number 23 secondary with his team coming out of the bye week, so they're going to be fresh, he'll be healthier, and they'll have a new offensive scheme moving forward when he was the priority right before the bye. Go ahead and start him. And then sit this next RB. This might seem crazy, but sit Travis Etienne, even after going for 100+ yards again last week. In back-to-back weeks, he's gone for 114 and 108 total yards, but there is a major issue here. His opportunity is still not great. It's slowly growing, but he's not pushing James Robinson out completely. Right now, he's seeing just about 50% of the snaps and 50% of the opportunities. So this isn't that encouraging to be in your starting lineup as somebody you want to rely on. But not only that, he has the 4th worst matchup of the week against the Giants, who rank top 10 in tackling, but there's even more bad news. Jacksonville has the 3rd worst run blocking advantage this week. Their offensive line ranks 27th in run blocking, and right now they have a negative 25% advantage in this matchup against the Giants. That's compared to average. That is not good. And now you might be saying, yeah, but we want to play Travis Etienne because he's a dynamic pass catcher, and even if they're trailing in this game, it means more receptions and targets for Etienne. Yeah, I would agree, but look at this news. The Giants give up the least receptions to running backs. So far, through 6 games this season, they've only allowed 15 total catches to the running back position. And keep in mind, he's not playing 100% of the snaps, Etienne. He's going to play about 50%. So expect maybe 2 or 3 catches at most here. That's not great. So sit Etienne, but then start this next veteran wide receiver. He's a must start. Not a flex option in your wide receiver spot, a must start. And that would be Brandon Cooks, who finds himself in an elite matchup against the Las Vegas Raiders. And it's even more of an elite matchup for his quarterback, Davis Mills. Because the Raiders this season give up the 3rd most fantasy points per game to the quarterback position, which means that Davis Mills will be able to be more efficient in an easier matchup, and he loves Brandon Cooks. He targets him 9.5 times per game in his career, and Cooks averages over 14 points per game with Davis Mills. This is borderline top 10 wide receiver production. And the matchup is indeed good for Mills, but Cooks has been fantastic this year. He ranks 13th at beating man coverage so far. And this has led to him earning about 8.5 targets per game, and he has at least 6 targets in every single game, so he has a nice floor here. But Brandon Cooks isn't the only player from this Texans team you want to lock in your lineup. And no, Davis Mills isn't the second guy. It's actually the running back from this team. And that would be Damien Pierce, who since he took over as a starter in week 3, like a full-time starter, he ranks 3rd in running back usage per game, only behind Derrick Henry and Josh Jacobs. You might be wondering, where's Joe Mixon on that list? If you factor in the first 2 weeks, especially week 1 when the game went to overtime for the Bengals, then Mixon starts to become the number 1 back in usage. But Damien Pierce is a top 3 usage back the last month of the season, and in those games, he's going for 100 total yards every game and a touchdown and 18+ points. He's a top 10 running back during this time. And all that's fantastic. And now he's a rookie coming out of the bye week, which is normally a good sign for rookies. They usually get more plays schemed around them, and his matchup is great. You see, he faces the Raiders, who rank right now 26th in tackling, and this is big for Damien Pierce because Pierce is 2nd in the NFL in broken tackles, only behind Nick Chubb. He's actually averaging 72 yards per game after contact this year, and now he faces a team who can't tackle. So you got to take him, grab him, and put him in your lineup, and then you also want to grab my fantasy cheat sheet, which is the 5-step framework I use to beat my league mates weekly and take home a fantasy championship. And you can get it right now if you want to, linked down below. And here's the best part for you. If you do not win your fantasy league, I will refund the one-time payment of $10 for the entire season. You get access to this. I'll refund that $10 if you don't win your fantasy league. That's how confident I am in this material. So if you want to join the thousands of other people using that material this week to beat their league mates, well, click the link in the description to get access. And then get Chase Claypool out of your lineup. He's coming off of the best game of his season, 23 fantasy points on 7 targets. This is great usage, but we got to break it down a little bit. You see, there was nothing special from this game compared to previous games in terms of Claypool's usage. He still saw his typical role of basically splitting the wide receiver 2 role with George Pickens. They each ran around 30 routes, and every single one of the Steelers wide receivers, if we scroll over here, saw 6 or more targets in this game. So it's not like Claypool saw more usage, saw more targets than the other guys. No, he just had an outlier game based on the volume he saw. And then there's the obvious elephant in the room, that his quarterback situation, no matter if it's Trubisky or Kenny Pickett, is not good. Because Trubisky ranks 33rd right now in quarterback efficiency, and believe it or not, the rookie in Pickett ranks 34th. And right now, this is not good, especially considering Claypool is still just seeing his normal role as like a wide receiver 3 in this offense. And now he is on the trade block, but you could use this to your advantage. Say, oh, he might go to the Packers, a team that never sends any trades. So you could use that to sweeten the deal in a potential trade, but if you can't get it done before this week, it might be your last shot. If not, though, put him on your bench. And you also want to bench Gerald Everett, who was a fantastic tight end the first couple of weeks of the season, but things have changed since then. Each of the last 4 weeks, his routes have gone down. He's only running a route on 67% of Justin Herbert's dropbacks, which isn't even top 20 amongst tight ends in the league. And now there's a clear reason for this. Donald Parham returned 2 weeks ago, another tight end to this offense, and it's taking usage and overall snaps and playing time away from Everett. Now, Parham isn't playing a lot, just 28% and then 18% of the snaps this season, so you don't want to be playing Parham, but this is enough usage to make Everett a sit. Because now through 2 games with Parham starting, Everett's only averaging 4.5 fantasy points a game compared to 12.3 the previous 4 weeks. So don't be playing Everett, and even try and trade him as soon as possible. And if you want to actually see the 12 league winners that you should trade for right now that aren't obvious, well then check out this beautiful video right here.